So the things that we talk about are from the aviation perspective. Crew resource management was initiated in the 1980s or introduced to the airlines in the 1980s as an aviation concept, but it became very apparent quickly after it was introduced that CRM, as it's known, is really universal to any critical outcome environment. We go back in time about 50 years, in the 1960s and 70s, was the beginning of the jet age, and jet aircraft were introduced into commercial aviation and made an impact that was probably could be compared to penicillin in healthcare. I mean, it was a tremendous impact. The aircraft made phenomenal advances. They could go faster, fly farther, fly higher. They carried more people and more payload. They were cheaper to operate. They could climb over weather instead of going around it. In general, they were safer. They were much safer than their piston engine predecessors. They were so much so that we sort of turned a blind eye whenever there was that accident, thinking, well, yeah, we just had an accident, but gosh, our accident rate is so much better than it was before. I mean, it just must be a cost of doing business. It's because what they found was that it wasn't the airplanes that were crashing, it was the pilots. It was the crews, and it was the system that we had and the culture that we had that was causing airplanes to literally fly into the ground. The bottom line of all this, when you look at all the numbers, now those are a couple of anecdotal stories about what worked, and people testify, or testimonials I guess you'd call them, of the fact that CRM has had an effect on the outcome of these accidents. But you can't argue at all with data. I mean, we're all into that kind of thing. My training is an engineer, and I think all of you are in a scientific field, and when you see the numbers, it's pretty astounding. In 1979, the year that CRM was first introduced, the accident rate per million departures was 7.1. In 2009, it was 0.71. That's 10 times reduction in accident rates. Now, that could be due to a number of factors. Technology has improved the way we do things, but certainly CRM has had a huge impact, and anybody in the aviation industry will attest to that. Communication. This picture, read it carefully, was sent to me from a doctor at Rhode Island Hospital. And I don't know how much of the literature gets, you know, the bad gossip gets out to you guys, but the doctor that works at this hospital that I know sent me an article that they're being investigated by the state of Rhode Island, by the medical board or whatever, and they're actually considering, I don't know, shutting down the hospital or something because of medical errors. And when she sent me this sign, I'm thinking, well, if the person that's in charge of making signage has anything, if that's indicative of the way they do things in the hospital, I can see what, you know, there might be a problem there. The NTSB determined that in 2/3 of the cases, somebody else knew something was wrong and they were afraid to speak up, or they hesitated when they could have shared the information, like the flight going into Portland that ran out of gas. Because fatigue is a really big factor for us, especially Gary and I fly internationally all the time, and so sleep management is just a big, big problem. And I know that in the medical community, especially in the hospital environment, for residents and so on, sleep is a big problem as well. Obviously, it affects memory, and I can attest to each one of these things. Items get skipped, you forget things, you get reduced attention span, you don't see things as well, you get moody. You know, you get moody, that affects everybody. Where we are right now, you look at 1977, this is a reenactment of the Tenerife accident where the two 747s collided, and 2009. We've come a long ways. You can see from the statistical data, we have really made some tremendous improvements in safety. In terms of aviation versus healthcare, of course, this is a repeat of the slide that you saw earlier with our statistics that we've had over the last 30 years. About 2 years ago, I talked to one of the board members from the Institute of Medicine that put out the report in 1999 about medical mistakes, and they came out with that statistic of 96,000, approximately 96,000 deaths due to medical errors. At that time, this was 2 years ago, this guy named Roger Herdman that I spoke with said that things really hadn't changed a whole lot. They really hadn't. So it's kind of up to you guys, and I think because of the fact that you invited us here to talk, that there's an interest in hearing how someone else succeeded at turning a culture around. I think that's a good sign, and that you're making the right steps toward correcting whatever problems that you have. And I'm going to quote again from my most recent favorite nonfiction author, Dr. Gawande. He says, "Failures of ignorance we can forgive. If the knowledge of the best thing to do in a given situation does not exist, we're happy to have people simply make their best effort. But if the knowledge exists and it's not applied, or not applied correctly, it's difficult not to be frustrated." Well, the knowledge exists, and it's up to you guys to determine how and when you're going to use it. Thank you.